The streets of Pinewood glistened under a thick blanket of snow, illuminated by the warm, twinkling glow of Christmas lights strung across houses, lampposts, and storefronts. The air carried a scent of pine and cinnamon, mingling with the soft hum of carolers gathered by the town square. It was the season of joy, a time when families came together and hope lingered in the frosty breeze. Yet, this year, a somber cloud hung over Pinewood. Mr. Harold Thompson, the kind-hearted owner of the town's century-old clock shop, had vanished. Known for his generosity and love of the Christmas season, Mr. Thompson's disappearance left the townsfolk shocked and uneasy. Some whispered of foul play. Others clung to the hope that he'd simply lost his way on one of his late-night strolls. But as the days stretched into weeks, hope faded. At the center of the turmoil was Lucas Thompson, Harold's 17-year-old son. The boy, tall and wiry with unruly brown hair, was an enigma to most. Known for his rebellious streak, skipping classes, skateboarding where he shouldn't, and mouthing off to authority, Lucas had never been close to his father, or so people assumed. Now, with Harold gone, Pinewood's collective suspicion turned toward Lucas. "It's the son," they murmured at the bakery and in the church pews. "He's always been trouble." Lucas had heard it all, and though he hid his pain behind a sharp tongue and clenched fists, the weight of the accusations crushed him. He wandered the town aimlessly most nights, his breaths forming puffs of steam in the icy air, his thoughts spiraling into confusion and anger. One such night, as the town square clock struck 9, Lucas knelt by a dumpster behind the local diner. He pulled a small sandwich from his pocket and set it on the ground. "Here," he muttered, shivering against the cold. From the shadows emerged Buddy. The golden-furred dog, thin and ragged, approached cautiously, his dark, intelligent eyes scanning Lucas before sniffing the food. His ribs protruded under his unkempt coat, but there was something dignified about him, a glimmer of awareness that made him more than just another stray. Lucas watched in silence as Buddy wolfed down the sandwich. "I guess we're both outcasts now," Lucas said, half to himself, half to the dog. Buddy's ears perked up, and for a fleeting moment, the two shared an unspoken understanding. The next morning, Buddy followed Lucas home. At first, Lucas tried shooing him away, muttering, "I don't have time for this," but Buddy was persistent, trailing behind him, tail wagging gently, as if sensing that Lucas needed him more than he realized. By evening, the dog had claimed a spot on the porch, curling up against the biting cold. It wasn't long before Buddy started noticing things, details Lucas overlooked in his grief and frustration. One afternoon, as Lucas rifled through the dusty back room of his father's shop, Buddy pawed at an old box. Curious, Lucas opened it and found a notebook filled with sketches of clocks, each one marked with cryptic notes and numbers. Among them was a design for a peculiar timepiece, with a note scrawled at the bottom. "For Lucas, when he's ready." The words sent a jolt through Lucas. His father had never shared his work, let alone something personal. What did he mean, "when he's ready"? That night, as the wind howled outside, Lucas flipped through the notebook under the dim light of a desk lamp. Buddy lay at his feet, his eyes flicking toward the boy every so often. The notebook seemed ordinary at first glance, filled with diagrams and measurements. But on closer inspection, Lucas noticed patterns, symbols repeated across the pages, their meaning unclear. Buddy let out a soft whine, breaking Lucas's concentration. The dog padded over to a nearby shelf, pawing at a small wooden box. When Lucas opened it, he found a pocket watch, its face cracked but its intricate gears still faintly ticking. Etched into the back were initials, HT. "What's this supposed to mean?" Lucas whispered, his fingers tracing the engraving. Buddy barked, a short, sharp sound that startled Lucas. All right, he said, standing up. "You're way too smart for a stray." The next few days passed in a blur of discoveries. Buddy led Lucas to other objects, an old key hidden in the shop's floorboards, a rolled-up map tucked behind a cabinet. Each clue seemed to connect to Harold Thompson's disappearance, yet none provided a clear answer. One night, Buddy guided Lucas to the edge of Pinewood, where the forest loomed dark and silent under a heavy blanket of snow. Lucas hesitated, the icy wind cutting through his coat. "What are we even looking for out here?" he muttered. Buddy barked again, his tail wagging furiously as he darted ahead. Reluctantly, Lucas followed. In a small clearing, they stumbled upon something unexpected. A discarded scarf that Lucas immediately recognized as his father's. It was damp and partially buried in snow, but it was unmistakable. Lucas's heart pounded. As he bent to pick it up, a shadow moved in the trees, and the sound of footsteps crunching through the snow reached his ears. Lucas froze, his breath catching. Buddy growled low in his throat, stepping protectively in front of the boy. "Who's there?" Lucas called, his voice trembling. Silence. Then, the footsteps retreated, fading into the forest. Lucas knelt beside Buddy, gripping the scarf tightly. "We're not crazy, are we, boy?" he asked. Buddy's steady gaze was his only reassurance. Back at the shop, Lucas laid out everything they'd found. The notebook, the key, the map, and now the scarf. Pieces of a puzzle, yet the picture was incomplete. But as Buddy nudged the map with his nose, something clicked. Lucas leaned closer, tracing the outline of pinewood. A small X marked a spot deep in the forest. This has to be it," he said, his voice a mixture of fear and determination. Buddy barked softly, as if agreeing. For the first time in weeks, Lucas felt a flicker of hope. Whatever had happened to his father, he wasn't facing it alone anymore. Together, he and Buddy would uncover the truth. And so, with Christmas fast approaching, the unlikely duo prepared to face the unknown, bound by an unspoken bond and the promise of answers waiting in the snowy woods. The biting cold of December clung to Pinewood like a stubborn shadow, and though the Christmas decorations sparkled brighter as the big day approached, the tension in town had only grown thicker. The rumors about Lucas continued to spread like wildfire, fueled by speculation and whispers in every corner of the close-knit community. Yet, Lucas cared less about clearing his name and more about deciphering the clues left by his father. At the heart of it all was Buddy, the golden-furred stray who had inexplicably become Lucas's closest ally. The dog's keen instincts and uncanny ability to lead Lucas to seemingly random discoveries had turned the boy from a skeptic into a reluctant believer. Somewhere, deep in his gut, Lucas knew Buddy wasn't just any dog. There was a connection between this stray and the mystery surrounding his father's disappearance. The first clue Lucas decided to investigate was the strange X marked on the map they'd found hidden in the clock shop. Buddy, as if understanding the significance of the spot, wagged his tail and nudged Lucas's hand whenever he hesitated. The journey to the marked location wasn't easy. The forest surrounding Pinewood was dense, with snow-covered paths that were slippery and treacherous. Lucas bundled himself in his thickest coat and gloves, but even so, the cold bit at his face and fingers. Buddy, unbothered by the icy conditions, trotted ahead, glancing back occasionally to make sure Lucas was following. After nearly an hour of trudging through the woods, they arrived at the X. At first, there was nothing but trees and undisturbed snow. Lucas frowned, feeling a wave of frustration. What now, Buddy? Was this a dead end? But Buddy wasn't deterred. He began sniffing the ground furiously, circling the area until he stopped abruptly and started digging. His paws kicked up snow, revealing something solid beneath the surface. Lucas knelt beside him and helped clear the remaining snow. What they uncovered was a small, metal lockbox. It was old and rusted, but the lock seemed intact. Lucas pulled out the key they'd found earlier in the clock shop and, with trembling hands, inserted it into the box. It clicked open. Inside was a collection of items. An old photograph of Lucas and his father standing in front of the clock shop, a folded piece of paper, and a pocket compass with initials etched into it. H.D. Lucas unfolded the paper, revealing a handwritten note. "Lucas, if you're reading this, it means you're ready. Trust Buddy. He knows more than you think. Follow the compass. It will guide you to what you need. And remember, no matter how things look, I did this for you." The message sent shivers down Lucas's spine, and not from the cold. His father had planned this. He had known something was coming, something dangerous. But why? And what did it have to do with Buddy? Lucas glanced at the dog, who sat patiently beside him, tail wagging as if to say, "What's next?" Back in town, things were becoming more complicated. The mayor, a man named Roger Whitmore, had announced plans to renovate Pinewood's main square. The centerpiece of this plan involved demolishing the clock shop to make way for a new community center. On the surface, it seemed like a noble idea, progress for the town. But Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. Buddy's instincts seemed to align with Lucas's suspicions. Every time they passed by Town Hall, the dog growled, his fur standing on end. Lucas noticed it, too. The way certain people avoided eye contact with him, the way their conversations abruptly stopped when he entered a room. It was as though everyone in Pinewood had decided he was guilty before he even had a chance to defend himself. It wasn't until Lucas overheard a conversation outside the general store that his suspicions solidified. Two men, standing just out of sight, were discussing the clock shop in hushed tones. "We need to make sure the kid stays quiet," one of them said. "If he finds out what Harold knew, this whole thing could fall apart." Lucas froze, his heart racing. He peeked around the corner, recognizing one of the men as Mr. Donovan, the owner of the pawn shop. The other man's face was hidden by the brim of a hat. "What about the dog?" the second man asked. "Just a stray. Forget about him," Donovan replied. Lucas ducked away, pulling Buddy with him. "Come on, boy," he whispered. "We've got to move." Back at the clock shop, Lucas sat on the floor with the compass in one hand and the note in the other. His mind swirled with questions. What did his father know that was so important? And why was Buddy such a crucial part of it? Buddy barked suddenly, startling Lucas. The dog ran to the door, pawing at it frantically. Lucas grabbed his coat and followed him outside, where Buddy immediately took off down the street. They ended up at the edge of Pinewood's industrial district, an area mostly abandoned since the old mill shut down years ago. Buddy led Lucas to a building that looked on the verge of collapse. Its windows were shattered, and its walls were covered in graffiti. Inside, they found evidence of recent activity: footprints in the dust, empty food wrappers, and a makeshift table covered in papers. Lucas scanned the documents, his eyes widening as he recognized the town's redevelopment plans. There were notes scribbled in the margins, detailing how the clock shop's land would be sold to a private developer for a massive profit. "This was never about a community center," Lucas muttered. "It's a cover-up." As he gathered the papers, Buddy barked again. This time louder, more urgent. Lucas turned to see a shadow moving across the far wall. Someone else was here. The confrontation was brief but intense. A tall man stepped out of the shadows, his face partially obscured by a scarf. He demanded the papers, his voice low and threatening. Lucas hesitated, clutching the documents tightly. Buddy, sensing the danger, growled and positioned himself between Lucas and the man. The stranger lunged, but Buddy leaped forward, barking ferociously. The commotion startled the man enough for Lucas to grab a rusty pipe from the floor and swing it defensively. "Stay back," Lucas shouted, his voice trembling. The man retreated, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as he had appeared. Lucas's heart pounded as he and Buddy made their way back to the shop, clutching the stolen papers like a lifeline. As the night deepened, Lucas sat by the fire, flipping through the documents. He couldn't shake the feeling that his father's disappearance, the redevelopment plans, and the strange connection with Buddy were all pieces of the same puzzle. Buddy rested his head on Lucas's lap, his warm presence a steadying force. For the first time in weeks, Lucas felt like he wasn't entirely alone. "I don't know how you do it, boy," Lucas said softly, stroking Buddy's fur. "But I think we're getting closer." In the flickering firelight, the compass on the table caught Lucas's eye, its needle pointing resolutely north. Whatever lay ahead, Lucas knew one thing: Buddy was the key to unraveling it all. The next morning, Pinewood woke to an even thicker blanket of snow, silencing the town under its weight. Lucas stared out the window of the clock shop, watching the flakes tumble lazily from the sky. Buddy lay beside him, his head resting on his paws, his tail flicking occasionally as though he were waiting for something. Lucas's mind was a storm of its own, piecing together the fragments of the mystery surrounding his father's disappearance. The redevelopment plans, the strange warning in his father's note, and the shadowy figure in the abandoned factory were beginning to form a sinister picture. But what gnawed at Lucas most was his father's final instruction: trust Buddy. Trust him to do what? Lucas muttered, glancing down at the dog. Buddy's dark, intelligent eyes met his, and for a moment, Lucas thought he saw understanding there. He shook his head. "You're just a dog," he said, half-heartedly, as if trying to convince himself. But even as he said it, Buddy trotted to the map they had found, nudging it with his nose. Lucas sighed and picked it up, tracing the compass's path northward. If they followed it, it would lead them deeper into the woods, past Pinewood's old mining district. The journey wasn't easy. The snow had thickened overnight, and the trails were nearly invisible beneath it. Lucas trudged forward, his boots crunching in the ice, while Buddy bounded ahead, his golden fur a streak of brightness against the white expanse. As they entered the mining district, the air seemed heavier, colder. Decaying wooden beams and rusted tracks poked through the snow, remnants of a time when Pinewood had been a bustling mining town. Now, the place was eerily silent, the only sound the wind howling through the skeletal remains of the old buildings. Buddy stopped abruptly, his ears perking up. He sniffed the air and growled low in his throat. Lucas froze. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, scanning the area. From behind a crumbling wall, a figure emerged, a tall man in a heavy coat, his face obscured by a scarf. Lucas's heart pounded as he recognized the man from the factory. "You've been busy," the man said, his voice gravelly. "But this is where your little treasure hunt ends." Lucas clenched his fists, stepping back instinctively. Buddy positioned himself in front of the boy, his growl deepening. "Where's my dad?" Lucas demanded, his voice trembling but resolute. The man chuckled. "Your father's smarter than I gave him credit for. Hiding clues in a dog? Ingenious. But you won't find him. Not before we finish what we started." The man lunged toward Lucas, but Buddy was faster. The dog sprang forward, teeth bared, forcing the man to stumble back. Seizing the opportunity, Lucas grabbed a chunk of wood from the ground and swung it, striking the man's arm. The man cursed, retreating into the shadows. "This isn't over," he shouted before disappearing into the trees. Lucas dropped the wood, his hands shaking. "Come on, Buddy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to keep moving." The compass led them to an abandoned mineshaft, its entrance partially collapsed but still accessible. Lucas hesitated, staring into the dark tunnel. "This is insane," he muttered. "There's no way my dad's in there." Buddy barked, wagging his tail as he stepped forward, his paws crunching on the icy ground. "Of course you want to go in," Lucas said, rolling his eyes. "You're not the one who's afraid of getting buried alive." Still, he couldn't ignore the feeling in his gut. This was the place. Taking a deep breath, he followed Buddy into the mineshaft, the faint light of his flashlight casting long, flickering shadows on the walls. Inside, the air was damp and cold, and the walls were covered in strange markings, symbols that looked eerily similar to the ones in his father's notebook. Lucas's flashlight flickered, and for a moment, the darkness seemed to close in around him. Buddy barked again, pulling Lucas's attention to a corner of the shaft. There, partially hidden under a pile of rubble, was a crate. Lucas knelt beside it and pried it open, revealing a collection of old tools, papers, and a small recorder. He pressed play, and his father's voice crackled to life. "Lucas, if you found this, it means I couldn't finish what I started. The clock shop is a front. They want it because of what's buried beneath it. The mine, the town's history, it's all connected. I left Buddy to protect you, to help you find the truth. Trust him. And Lucas, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner." The message cut off abruptly, leaving Lucas staring at the recorder in stunned silence. "What does that even mean?" he whispered. Buddy barked, nudging Lucas toward a set of blueprints among the papers. The plans showed an underground network connecting the mine to the town square and directly to the clock shop. Lucas and Buddy returned to Pinewood as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the town in shades of blue and gray. The clock shop loomed ahead, its windows dark and lifeless. Inside, Lucas spread the blueprints across the counter, studying them under the dim glow of a single bulb. According to the plans, there was a hidden passage beneath the shop, leading to a chamber that had been sealed off for decades. Whatever was there, it was important enough to make his father disappear, and to put Lucas and Buddy in danger. As Lucas searched for the entrance, Buddy began pawing at the floorboards near the back room. Lucas joined him, prying up the wood to reveal a trapdoor. "You've got to be kidding me," Lucas muttered, his heart pounding. The trapdoor led to a narrow staircase, spiraling down into the earth. The air grew colder and heavier with each step, and Lucas's flashlight flickered ominously. Buddy stayed close, his presence a steady comfort. At the bottom of the stairs, they found the chamber. It was small and cluttered, filled with old documents, mining equipment, and a strange device that looked like a mix between a clock and a compass. Lucas picked up the device, its gears clicking faintly. "What is this?" he murmured. Before he could examine it further, footsteps echoed above them. Someone was in the shop. Buddy growled, his ears flattening against his head. Lucas quickly hid the device and crept back up the stairs, peeking through the trapdoor. Standing in the shop were two men, one of them the same figure from the factory, the other unmistakably Mayor Whitmore. "We need to find the kid," the mayor said, his voice tense. "If he gets to Harold before we do, everything falls apart." Lucas's blood ran cold. Buddy nudged him gently, as if to say, "We'll figure this out." Lucas clenched his fists, his determination hardening. He didn't know how, but he was going to finish what his father started, and he wasn't going to let anyone stop him. The cold of Christmas Eve blanketed Pinewood in an almost supernatural stillness, broken only by the soft crunch of snow beneath hurried footsteps. Inside the clock shop, Lucas and Buddy worked frantically in the dim light, their breath visible in the freezing air. The blueprints from the mine sat open on the counter, alongside the strange clock compass Lucas had discovered in the hidden chamber. Its faint ticking was irregular, almost as if it were alive, and the needle spun erratically, refusing to settle. Lucas's mind raced. He pieced together fragments of his father's recordings, the mayor's words, and the cryptic clues left behind. Pinewood's redevelopment wasn't just about greed. It was about control. The chamber beneath the shop contained something more valuable than money. Evidence of the town's buried history, one that Harold Thompson had uncovered and was determined to protect. "We have to finish this," Lucas said, looking down at Buddy. The dog's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. The moment Lucas stepped outside, the weight of the town seemed to bear down on him. Snow fell in thick, heavy flakes, muffling the world around him. He tugged his coat tighter and followed Buddy, the dog leading him instinctively toward the town square. The square was eerily empty, its usual cheer muted by the lateness of the hour. The grand Christmas tree in the center sparkled with multicolored lights, casting long shadows across the snow-covered ground. As Lucas approached, the needle of the clock compass finally settled, pointing toward the tree. Beneath it, Buddy began digging furiously at the snow. Lucas dropped to his knees, brushing the snow away until they uncovered a metal hatch. His heart raced as he pried it open, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. "We're going down there, aren't we?" he muttered. Buddy wagged his tail, as if in response. The tunnel beneath the square was narrow and damp, its walls lined with ancient bricks. The air smelled of earth and rust, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed around them. Lucas's flashlight cast flickering beams ahead, illuminating a series of symbols etched into the walls, symbols identical to the ones in his father's notebook. "This has to be it," Lucas whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and hope. As they ventured deeper, the tunnel widened into a cavernous room. In the center stood a pedestal, atop which rested a large, ornate clock. Its design was unlike anything Lucas had ever seen. Intricate gears and golden hands spun silently, their movement hypnotic. Lucas approached cautiously, the clock compass in his hand vibrating faintly as he neared. Beside the pedestal lay a stack of papers, maps, and journals, all bearing his father's handwriting. This is what they wanted, Lucas realized. The clock wasn't just a timepiece. It was a mechanism tied to Pinewood's past. According to the journals, Harold had discovered that the town was built atop a network of old mining tunnels containing rare minerals, ones that could revolutionize modern technology. The clock was a key, a way to locate and control the network. Suddenly, The sound of footsteps echoed down the tunnel. Lucas's stomach dropped. "Find the boy," a voice growled. "He has the key." It was the man from the factory, and he wasn't alone. Lucas grabbed the journals and stuffed them into his backpack. Buddy barked, positioning himself protectively in front of the boy. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by the flicker of flashlights bouncing off the tunnel walls. "Over here," someone shouted. Panic surged through Lucas. "We have to move," he whispered to Buddy, sprinting toward the far end of the cavern. The chase through the tunnels was a blur of adrenaline and fear. Lucas's flashlight bounced wildly, casting erratic shadows as he and Buddy darted around corners and squeezed through narrow passageways. Behind them, the men shouted and cursed, their voices growing closer. Buddy suddenly stopped and barked sharply, drawing Lucas's attention to a small crevice in the wall. Without hesitation, Lucas slipped through, pulling Buddy in after him. They crouched in the dark, holding their breath as the men stormed past. When the sound of footsteps faded, Lucas exhaled shakily. "Good boy," he whispered, scratching Buddy's head. The two emerged from the tunnels into the basement of the clock shop, the hatch slamming shut behind them. Lucas bolted it tightly, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't have much time. He laid out the journals on the counter, scanning his father's notes for any mention of what to do next. His eyes landed on a single passage. "The clock is the key, but it requires the right hands to set it. Only those who seek the truth will find it." Lucas frowned, his gaze drifting to the strange clock compass. Its needle pointed directly at the grandfather clock in the corner of the shop. Buddy barked softly, as if urging him on. Lucas approached the clock, his hands trembling as he adjusted its hands to match the symbols etched on the compass. The gears groaned, and a hidden compartment clicked open, revealing another recording device. He pressed play. "Lucas," his father's voice began, "if you've made it this far, you've done what I couldn't. The clock is more than a mechanism. It's a symbol of our family's legacy. Pinewood deserves the truth, but the mayor and his people will do everything to bury it. You need to expose them. I'm proud of you, son." Tears welled in Lucas's eyes, but there was no time to dwell. He grabbed the recorder and journals, determination hardening his resolve. Outside, the town square was now bustling with people, drawn by the commotion of the men searching the tunnels. The mayor stood at the center, speaking loudly about Lucas being a troublemaker and a danger to the community. Lucas stepped forward, his voice cutting through the crowd. "Stop lying." All eyes turned to him. The mayor's face twisted in surprise and anger. "I have proof," Lucas continued, holding up the journals and the recorder. "You've been hiding the truth about Pinewood for years. My dad found it, and you tried to silence him." The crowd murmured, uncertainty spreading like wildfire. The mayor sneered. "Don't listen to him. He's just a kid." But Lucas wasn't alone. Buddy barked loudly, drawing attention as Lucas played his father's recording. The voice of Harold Thompson filled the square, laying bare the mayor's corruption and the conspiracy to exploit the town's resources for profit. The crowd's murmurs turned to outrage. By Christmas morning, the mayor and his accomplices were in custody, and Pinewood was buzzing with the news of Lucas's bravery. The journals and recordings were turned over to authorities, ensuring the town's history and its future would be protected. As the snow continued to fall, Lucas and Buddy returned to the clock shop, where Harold Thompson stood waiting. His face was pale and tired, but his eyes sparkled with pride. "You did it," Harold said, pulling Lucas into a tight embrace. "I knew you could." Lucas smiled, tears streaming down his face. "I couldn't have done it without Buddy." The golden dog wagged his tail, his eyes bright and full of joy. That night, as the town gathered in the square to celebrate Christmas, Lucas looked at Buddy and whispered, "You're more than a dog, aren't you?" Buddy simply wagged his tail, as if to say, "You'll never know." And as the clock struck midnight, the town of Pinewood experienced a Christmas miracle it would never forget. Thank you very much for watching the video to the end. If you were moved by the story of the canine hero and the spirit of Christmas that transformed lives, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments what you thought of this exciting journey.